Welcome back to Axis of Truth on JNS. Today we have a major scandal to expose that warrants a prompt investigation in the US and UK into Western influencers who are shilling for the Islamic Republic of Iran, going on influencer trips to sanitize the regime's image after their massacre of their own citizens. Currently, the regime is under extensive international sanctions for a litany of crimes, but it's already admitted that it funds foreign influencer delegations to rehabilitate its global image in recent years, and now they're doing it with the US and UK citizens. Here's what we know. In 2023, the Islamic Consultative Assembly approved a cultural budget provision authorizing the Islamic Culture and Relations Organization, ICRO, and similar state bodies to enter into contracts with foreign nationals for up to $20 million. Yeah, $20 million for the promotion and marketing of the regime. In November 2024, the Tehran municipality even admitted that it paid for a delegation of 12 foreign influencers, covering hotel and travel expenses. Regime media also reported that government bodies financed those trips. Yet mysteriously, separate reporting in regime media described municipal media contracts whose details later disappeared from the regime's transparency portal, particularly spending tied to media and social media outreach. How convenient! Well, one of these vile individuals on the current trip is Pakistani-British Islamist Bushra Sheikh. Now, Bushra is a Hamas fangirl, and she's publicly described activists tearing down posters of kidnapped Israeli hostages as heroic. She advocates for Sharia law openly while living in the United Kingdom, where she benefits from the protections of a secular democratic system and does not herself wear a hijab. Now, she's inside Iran, a country where women are imprisoned or worse for refusing mandatory hijab. And she's so tone-deaf that she actually filmed herself bragging about not wearing a hijab and falsely implied that women have a choice in Iran. Ironically, in subsequent videos from inside Iran, she is wearing one. I guess it's maybe not so free after all, Bushra? Take a look.
What's amazing, guys, is I have walked this entire rally in the middle of Iran without a hijab on. And I know what loads of you are thinking. You're thinking, how is she in the middle of Tehran at that square without her scarf on? Nothing has happened to me. Nobody has abused me. Nobody has said anything. In fact, when you are a visitor in Iran, they treat you so well, even me, without a hijab. But it's the fact that I have come here, I have been welcomed, and nobody has said a single thing to me about my hair being uncovered. And that, for you, my friends, is the reality of news when it's brought to you live from the country, especially when you have been propagandized for a long time by Western media. And that is simply not true.
Absolutely delusional, not to mention a slap in the face to all of the women of Iran who have suffered under the morality police. Just disgusting, a despicable, shameful person. Now, it's also relevant that in 2024, she publicly posted that she'd been invited by Iranian ministers to join an official 10-day conference tour. Now, I can't confirm whether that prior invitation resulted in a government-funded trip, and she hasn't publicly stated that this current visit is government-sponsored, but it establishes prior direct engagement with regime officials in an official capacity. And given the sites she's visited on this tour, it's highly likely that this is indeed a government-paid tour. But beyond being morally despicable, there is a legal angle to this issue that needs to be investigated and thoroughly. Under the UK's Iran Sanctions Regulations 2023, UK nationals are bound by sanctions law wherever they are in the world. They're prohibited from dealing with the funds or economic resources of a designated person or from receiving economic resources from a designated entity without a license from the Office of Financial Sanctions Implementation. Economic resources can include flights, hotels, hospitality, logistics, and other travel expenses provided in kind. If a UK national participating in this current delegation received travel, accommodation, or other economic resources funded through the regime bodies, that could constitute a prohibited dealing under UK sanctions law, unless an OFSI license was obtained, which I find highly unlikely to be the case for Bushra. The UK government must investigate her. This isn't just an issue of her unfathomably heinous views. Rather, it's an issue of national security. But she wasn't alone. Kala Walsh is another revolting activist on this same delegation right now. She's the founder of Palestine Action US, a former Democratic Party progressive activist, and of course, a communist. Real winner there. Anyway, this isn't actually her first trip to Iran. On a previous visit, she was filmed chanting death to America and death to Israel. She also visited IRGC weapon sites and praised institutions tied to the IRGC, which is a designated terror group by the United States and subject to extensive sanctions. Under U.S. sanctions law, U.S. persons are broadly prohibited from engaging in transactions with the government of Iran or with designated entities such as the IRGC without a specific license. Now, that prohibition includes receiving funds or things of value from sanctioned entities and providing services to them. OFAC defines services broadly, and it can include promotional activities or participation in events that materially benefit sanctioned bodies. There are narrow exceptions for journalism, humanitarian work, or licensed academic exchanges. Kala Walsh doesn't fall into any of those categories. If she received travel or accommodation funded by the government of Iran, Tehran municipality, IRGC-linked institutions, or affiliated cultural bodies, or if she provided services that materially benefited those sanctioned entities, such as providing propaganda to sanitize the regime's image as she has done, that could easily fall within the scope of OFAC enforcement. The regime has already admitted that it funds these types of delegations. It's admitted covering expenses in the past. It's authorized contracts with foreign individuals for image promotion. And given that documented pattern, the question is whether Western nationals currently participating in this delegation received economic resources or provided services in violation of sanctions law. And that is a question that deserves investigation as soon as possible. Well, it's been a busy weekend, and I myself just returned from Munich, where I spoke at the massive Iranian protest alongside numerous European MPs, Senator Lindsey Graham, and the Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi. And what a protest it was. More than 250,000 people came out in the freezing rain to send a message to the United States and the entire Western world that the Iranian people need assistance. Yes, military assistance with bringing down the Islamic Republic. As we've seen consistently in recent weeks, the Iranian people are waiting with bated breath to see if the United States will strike the Islamic Republic and help them bring down their oppressors. President Trump has made stern warnings to the regime, but continues to say that his first choice is to avoid a military conflict and make a deal, something that I would argue is completely misguided in the first place, unless it's simply posturing. That said, we did see a bit of a change of tune from President Trump again this week. Let's take a look.
Offers heat change in Iran? Well, it seems like that would be the best thing that could happen. For 47 years, they've been talking and talking and talking. In the meantime, we've lost a lot of lives while they talk, and legs blown off, arms blown off, faces blown off. Tremendous power has arrived, and additional power, as you know, another carrier is going out shortly. So we'll see it out. If we could get it settled for once and for all, that'd be good. What do you want it for? What? Would you want to take over? I don't want to talk about that. There are people.
Well, interesting response from President Trump. Definitely a welcome comment, given his previous comments. But it'll be interesting to see what he means by hopefully we can get it all done. President Trump has indeed sent a second aircraft carrier to the Middle East this past week, and the U.S. military is poised and positioned to begin what looks like, or what could be, a large-scale operation against the Islamic regime in Iran. But they're still trying to negotiate, and most recently, the Islamic regime has offered to establish economic ties that would benefit the U.S. as part of this negotiating strategy. But the truth is, there's nothing the Islamic Republic can offer other than their resignation that would be sufficient. As I said on the stage in Munich, Iranians aren't interested in a deal. 40,000 of them, more than 40,000, didn't die so that they can make a deal that limits yet preserves the Islamic regime. But it wasn't just in Munich that this important event took place on Saturday. Yes, this week is the Munich Security Conference, an important meeting of world leaders, particularly from Europe, analyzing national security issues. That was why that main demonstration was held in Munich. But we also saw hundreds of thousands of people show up to protest all over the world on behalf of the people of Iran. In Los Angeles, more than 370,000 people came. In Toronto, 500,000. And incidentally, in every single protest, Israeli flags were present, not just being held by Israelis, but by Iranians. In Munich, for the first time in my life, I felt safe walking with an Israeli flag in Europe, which is a little bit sad, but also a clear reflection of where Iranians stand. These people are pouring their hearts and souls out into the streets for the hope of freedom and regime change in Iran. And they sent a clear message that was heard around the world through just one day of peaceful protesting. And let me break this down for you a little bit more, because honestly, it's truly remarkable that many people were involved in so many places and that no one got arrested or had any kind of incident. Iranians have not only demonstrated to the world that they want regime change and that they want Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi as the transitional leader, but they've also sent a message to the world on how to behave in major protests. Everywhere there were protests of Iranians, there were zero incidents, and the protesters behaved with respect for each other, for the environment, and for law enforcement. Now, contrast that to the encampments on campuses in the U.S. or the violent anti-Israel protests that we saw for more than 2 years after October 7th. Iranians brought flowers for law enforcement, and I witnessed them repeatedly thanking them for their efforts to keep the peace. And do you remember how Palestinian activists left the protests after the fact? A complete mess with trash and destruction everywhere that they left for others to clean up for them. In contrast, Iranians spent hours cleaning up trash, including in the freezing cold in Toronto and in Munich, to ensure that they respected the countries that allowed them the freedom to protest, a freedom that they don't have inside of Iran right now. This isn't to put on a show. It's a part of who they are. It's their character and their culture, and that is something that, frankly, even in Israel, we could take a lesson from. The 2026 JNS International Policy Summit will take place April 15 to 17 at the Waldorf Astoria here in Jerusalem. Register today at jns-summit.org and use the coupon code JNSTV, that is JNSTV, one word, to receive 20% off all tickets. Looking forward to seeing you here in Jerusalem. But while the Iranian people have made their demands peacefully and clearly, some, it seems, are still trying to subvert that message. Despite the fact that we saw an unprecedented scale of protests internationally from the Iranian diaspora and allies, some media networks, including Voice of America Farsi, which is funded by U.S. taxpayers, seem to be intentionally avoiding reporting on this issue. How can more than 1 million people around the world unite with one common demand, yet VOA Farsi doesn't even report it? Now, VOA Farsi has come under harsh criticism lately after Kari Lake, a Trump appointee, hired Ali Javanmardi to lead the channel. Javanmardi is an Iranian Kurdish journalist who has been accused of being a separatist and promoting separatist ideology, which is something that the Iranian people, including the majority of Iranians, strongly and passionately oppose. Territorial integrity is a core value of the Iranian people. But it's clear that whatever is actually going on with Javanmardi is not in agreement with what the Iranian people are demanding right now. And instead of doing his job and reporting properly, there seems to be a censorship of Iranian voices inside Iran and abroad that are calling for the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi to become the transitional leader. Now, throughout the protests in Iran, the coverage on VOA Farsi was wildly skewed, and there were reports, though unconfirmed, that VOA Farsi journalists were directed not to share videos and content of people on the ground risking their lives to call for the return of Reza Pahlavi. Now, even more concerning is that the MEK group, which I explained about last week, is a Marxist Islamist group that helped Khomeini come to power in '79. They too held a small demonstration in Munich the day before. Funny enough, that showed up in VOA Farsi, but not the 250,000 patriots demanding regime change. VOA Farsi has an important role in distributing information to Iranians in the voice of the United States. Literally, it's funded by the taxpayer. So why is Javanmardi seemingly promoting an agenda that isn't in the interest of Iranians or in the interests of the United States? The bias is blatant and it warrants action. Literally, the last thing that an American taxpayer-funded news network should be doing is silencing the will of the Iranian people. Now, Kari Lake is aware of this problem, as many Iranians have complained to her, yet instead of taking action to remedy the problem, she's proceeded to block Iranians who call this out and even double down on defending Javan Mahdi. I would like to give Kari Lake the benefit of the doubt and assume that she just doesn't really understand the sensitivities of this issue for Iranians, but if that's really the case, blocking Iranians who are trying to tell you otherwise is not the way forward. And with that, let's jump to the good, the bad, and the ugly of the week. Now, I know the whole point of the good, the bad, and the ugly is the phrase, but I've heard from you guys that you don't like to end the show on such a negative note. So from now on, I'm going to do things a little differently with the good, the bad, and the ugly in a different order. We'll start with the ugly story, move to the bad story, and finish off on a positive note with the good story of the week. So to kick things off, the ugly story of the week: extremism in Israel. Yes, in Israel. This week, disturbing footage was released yesterday of 2 female Israeli police officers being chased and harassed by a mob of ultra-Orthodox Israelis in Bnei Brak. Apparently, this happened because they went to visit another officer in the area, and the extremists began violently rioting, overturned a police car, and the 2 officers had to be extracted physically. Take a look at what happened. Disgusting behavior, difficult to watch, but unfortunately, this isn't the first time that we've seen things like this happen. Right now, Israel is facing a major internal political issue, as many of the ultra-Orthodox are exempt from the army draft. And there's been an ongoing effort to remedy that because, in my opinion, everyone should serve their country equally. There shouldn't be different standards for different people if they're all citizens, especially when national service within their own communities is an option. However, we have seen that some rabbis have actually incited against IDF soldiers and the state of Israel itself in order to advance their own political agendas and interests, which really ultimately damages both sides. There have also been ongoing efforts in segments of the ultra-Orthodox population, of course not all of them, that have been engaging in a campaign to erase women from public life and conversation as much as possible. We've seen some of these extremists defacing advertisements that feature women in recent years and otherwise behaving in ways that honestly have more in common with the morality police in Iran than they do with the values of the state of Israel. It's completely unacceptable, and it's against Judaism. You don't get to just destroy other people's property because you don't like something. You don't get to threaten and harass women, screaming and cursing like savages because they're different from you. It's something that this society should never accept, whether religious or secular. Erasing women from society not only leads to a stagnated economy, but it also means that their needs, even at the most basic level like healthcare, aren't met. It means their issues related to things like health aren't on the agenda because people don't know about them. It means that what makes them successful, contributing members of society isn't a priority for the nation. And it means that they're excluded from the rooms where conversations that affect their very futures take place. This is something that goes against everything that we believe in. Piousness doesn't equate to the erasure of a woman's voice. And now our bad story of the week is a bit of a good take on a bad phenomenon. There's an activist and a friend of mine called Adiel Cohen who creates amazing content about Israel. Now, he's been traveling all around the world, especially in Latin America, and meeting with people from different countries. And he has a variety of colorful stories to tell, both positive and negative, as would somewhat be expected. But the one phenomenon that we continue to see around the world that is amplified by social media is the tolerated hatred, specifically of Israeli and Jewish people. We're currently living in an environment in which people think that discrimination against Jewish people is acceptable because they see it so much on social media. So Adiel decided to throw it back in their faces a little bit and put it into perspective. Let's take a look.
Excuse me, Mr. Guide. There's a group of black people here, and, can I just switch groups? Because it's making me feel really uncomfortable.
I'm in this scuba trip with 3 Asians, and, I just don't want to talk to them. It's making me seem like I'm antisocial, but, I don't want to talk to them, because, with all that happened in World War II, what the Japanese did, what if their grandparents did some fucked up shit in Vietnam? I don't know.
Where's it from? Armenia. Oh, I'm all for Azerbaijan, by the way, just so you know, just putting it out there. From Ukraine. Interesting. Did you kill in Russian? Free Catalonia! Free Catalonia! Yeah, I said free Catalonia, you know? Visiting from France, right? Welcome, yeah. We don't really like you people here. From Dubai, that's cool, Like, you have a lot of money to travel, right? Because, like, you guys are really rich, and you guys, like, control the, like, you guys have a lot of money. Like, you're from China? Oh.
Of course, beyond being funny, he is, unfortunately, absolutely correct. None of us would or should accept this type of hateful bigotry and discrimination against various minorities and nationalities that we may encounter. And yet every one of these examples is an actual video that's gone viral, or at least semi-viral, on social media, of people thinking that it's acceptable to say these kinds of things about Jews and/or Israelis. It isn't. If you wouldn't say this about any other minority group, why would you think it's okay to say about Jews? You don't have to like Israeli policy or to like the Israeli government to be a decent and civilized human being towards people you may disagree with. The fact that this radicalism has been tolerated more and more with every day and further amplified by social media is a social phenomenon that has the potential to destroy the West. Just as I always warned that what starts with Jews never ends with the Jews. We have to push back against this before it grows even larger. The bigotry that we see in some of the online content today is sheer demonization and dehumanization of millions of people based on their nationality. Those are not the values of the Western world. Those are not the values of a liberal democracy. Those are the values of a third world jihadist cult. And unfortunately, the West has allowed far too many of those people into their countries. It's time to push back. And finally, our good story of the week, which comes from none other than U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who this week addressed that Munich security conference I mentioned earlier when I was there. Now, his entire speech was absolutely phenomenal, so much so that he even got a standing ovation from the Europeans, not something to be taken lightly these days. But the way that he spoke about the failures and the current state of the international community, particularly the UN, is exactly what the entire world needs to hear. Let's take a look.
We do not need to abandon the system of international cooperation we authored. And we don't need to dismantle the global institutions of the old order that together we built. But these must be reformed. These must be rebuilt. For example, the United Nations still has tremendous potential to be a tool for good in the world. But we cannot ignore that today, on the most pressing matters before us, it has no answers and has played virtually no role. It could not solve the war in Gaza. Instead, it was American leadership that freed captives from barbarians and brought about a fragile truce. It has not solved the war in Ukraine. It took American leadership in partnership with many of the countries here today just to bring the two sides to the table in search of a still elusive peace. It was powerless to constrain the nuclear program of radical Shia clerics in Tehran. That required 14 bombs dropped with precision from American B-2 bombers. And it was unable to address the threat to our security from a narco-terrorist dictator in Venezuela. Instead, it took American special forces to bring this fugitive to justice. In a perfect world, all of these problems and more would be solved by diplomats and strongly worded resolutions. But we do not live in a perfect world.
Exactly.
And we cannot continue to allow those who blatantly and openly threaten our citizens and endanger our global stability to shield themselves behind abstractions of international law which they themselves routinely violate.
Exactly. It's a tragic but correct assessment of the status quo today. And the longer that Europe and the rest of the Western world ignore it, the harder it's going to be to reform it. I remind you that this past week, the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres sent a letter to the Islamic Republic of Iran extending his warmest greetings on behalf of the anniversary of the Islamic regime. This is a matter of weeks after that same regime brutally massacred more than 40,000 people and continues carrying out torture, sexual violence, and executions of Iranian citizens for protesting. If that's not enough, the UN also invited an official of the Islamic Republic to address the Human Rights Council. After immense pushback, they canceled the invitation, but invited a different official instead. They just can't get it right. And that is exactly what shows how correct Marco Rubio was in everything he said. And that does it for this week on Axis of Truth. We will, as always, be back next week with more stories and updates from across the region. If you have a story for me, feel free to reach out on social media at Emily K. Schrader or Emily in Tel Aviv on Instagram. And we'll see you next week on Axis of Truth on JNS.